Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Truth. I'm John Gordon. It is now official. Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee for President of the United States without ever having received a single primary vote. As you know, when she ran against Joe Biden in 2020, she got less than 2%. But now, while they are certain that they are preserving democracy, they anoint someone who has gone through no process to become the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. It is a first in our country's history. It is as disappointing as it is maddening. And it wouldn't be so bad if the people that they had chosen were not so downright against America and what it stands for. Kamala Harris will tell you that she's had no responsibility for the border, even though early in the administration she was touted as the border czar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a battle between Republicans and Democrats. It's really not a battle between conservatives and liberals. This is a battle of the haves against the have-nots, or actually the other way around, the have-nots against the haves. People who have educated themselves, brought themselves up by their bootstraps, pursued careers, risked their capital to start businesses, create jobs, build businesses, save, invest, pay their taxes, abide by the laws. And Kamala Harris makes no bones about it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is in your face politics. You know, when I was coming along, we used to talk about the proverbial back smoke-filled room. Today, they don't even go to the trouble to go to the back smoke-filled room. It's just in your face. We're going to do what we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. Tim Walz, vice president, his qualifications are having been a high school football coach. He served 24 years in the Minnesota National Guard, but then when he had a chance to go into combat, he decided not to. I said last week, I think that's appropriate. I don't think that at that age, after 24 years, being in your mid-40s, I don't think it's reasonable to expect someone to go into combat. I think you've aged out of combat at that point. But then to go out and brag about having served in combat when you didn't is the problem that I have. And everything these people are doing is just serving us up one lie after another. Oh, Kamala had nothing to do with the border. Yet early in the administration, she was going to be the Biden administration point person for the border. And they just play us. They play us. They insult our intelligence. They act like we don't know better. But we're going to have a chance on November the 5th to show them that we do know better. The question is, can we get it across the line? Or will there be another steal? Later in the broadcast today, we've got a gentleman who ran for the Supervisor of Elections in Pinellas County, Florida, and he has filed an action in the court of jurisdiction alleging significant voter fraud. 217,000 people who voted illegally. And what do the courts do? They just toss it out. Just kick the can down the road and do nothing about it. We're in deep trouble, folks, if something doesn't change. And to me, it all traces back to the Dems and their liberal policies and their unwillingness to self-discipline even a little bit when it comes to getting their way. They will get their way at all cost, even if they have to kill to get their way. Did you watch the convention? Boy, was it a love fest or what? And isn't Kamala the greatest that's ever been? She's so pretty, she's so kind, she's so compassionate, she's so intelligent. Yet there was nothing about inflation. Nothing about skyrocketing crime. Nothing about how they're going to fix the border. Nothing about how they're going to stop fentanyl coming into the United States. Nothing about how they're going to stop Chinese aggression and prevent them from moving on Taiwan. Nothing about how they were going to solve the Ukraine-Russia conflict other than just send Ukraine some more money. We have already sent the Ukraine more money than we have currently allocated to repair our own roads and bridges in this country. It's a disaster. It's a travesty. And we're carrying the load for all of Europe, and that too is a tragedy. Europe needs to pay their fair share. As President Trump has pointed out, if you add up all the European nations, their GDP is the equivalent of the United States. Why aren't they paying their fair share of their defense? I think it's a reasonable question. And Kamala Harris wants to fix inflation by imposing price caps on groceries. She's going to tell grocery distributors how much they can charge for their products. Ladies and gentlemen, that is communism. We have an alternative to that in this country. It's called capitalism. And when you have competing providers, in this case, grocery distributors, competition is going to control the prices that they can charge. They want a price gouge. Okay, somebody will supply the same loaf of bread for less, and the consumer is going to buy that brand. But that's not good enough for the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign. And I think Trump is exactly right when he calls her and refers to her as Comrade Kamala. Now that nickname resonates. That nickname has the ring of truth because it's in Russia that the leaders are selected. It is in Russia that they are picked rather than elected. It is in Russia where they try, and they don't try, they kill their political adversaries. And we saw it in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th when Michael Crooks attempted to take the life of Donald Trump. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the entire Democratic convention, to me, was about what Democrats do. All this virtuous talk. Oh, isn't Michelle just so special? Isn't she wonderful? She was the highlight of the convention. And that Barack, he is so eloquent and so statesmanlike. All they did was criticize Donald Trump. That's all they did for 4 days. That was the sole basis for their being in Chicago, was to criticize Donald Trump. And by the way, did you see in the initial days, the coordination of the convention was an absolute cluster. People were lined up in lines that went all the way around the block to get in. I can tell you, I went to the Republican National Convention, as you know, and I did not wait in line more than 10 minutes at the security checkpoint where you had to go through the magnetometer and empty your pockets and take your belt off. Just no different than if you were boarding a plane. And the wait literally was a maximum of 10 minutes. Most of the time, there was an inconsequential wait, maybe a minute or two. And the people in Milwaukee, I'll say it again, were the most hospitable. Even the cops, even the people who were in charge of security. Welcome. Thank you. Step this way. Come right in. This won't take but a minute. Oh, the line's moving quickly. We'll get you right through. I left that town just on the biggest sugar high that you can imagine because of the politeness and the civility with which we were treated. But in Chicago, they painted a really different picture. The lines were around the block, and it took hours for delegates to get in to the venue. And then documented members of the media would not be granted admittance. So the contrast was very dramatic to me. And I know the party that I would like to affiliate with, or it just validated, actually, my affiliation with the Republican Party. Breaking news yesterday, Robert Kennedy, RFK Jr., dropped out as an independent candidate for president of the United States, and in doing so, endorsed Donald J. Trump. Now, I'm not saying I told you so, okay? I know nobody likes that when somebody does that. But do you recall months ago when I said, I really kind of like Robert Kennedy? I don't like everything about him. I don't like his radical positions on climate, although I will say it again. I think there is a middle ground on climate. And I don't talk about climate. I talk about doing what I do and what I encourage my family to do, because to me, it just feels right. And that is turn out the light. Don't leave the water running. Don't water the grass when it's just poured down rain. That's called conservation. Don't litter. Don't put don't throw trash out of the car, and don't pollute our waterways. Now, that is a cousin, I guess, of climate. I make no apology for that, though. I think every living American should sign up to be conservationist. When I have been extended hospitality from my friends and they've invited me to come stay at their house or use their lake house or their house in the mountains, I intentionally try to leave it better than I found it, which sometimes is really hard to do because I've never found them other than in absolute beautiful condition. But I take the trash out, I make the bed, I strip the beds. I make sure that the towels and the washcloths are in the hamper. And I do my best to be a nice guest. Well, I'm not extolling my virtue. That's not the point. The point is we all have an obligation on this planet to leave it in better shape than we found it. Do you have a problem with that? I hope not. And that's why I celebrate the electric car. That's why I celebrate the advent of solar power. And the fact of the matter is, I never had allergies until I moved to Atlanta. And within about 3 years as an adult, I developed horrible seasonal allergies. My eyes scratched, my nose ran, I would sneeze all the time. I had fatigue. And I went to the doctor and I said, Doctor, something is wrong with me. I've lost my mojo. I go to work in the morning at 8 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock, I have to come home and take a nap because I'm out of gas. And they ran test after test after test. They tested my blood. They did ultrasounds. They did MRIs. They looked in my brain. They looked for cancer. They looked for blood clots. They looked for, what do you call it when you have an aneurysm? And they looked for everything. I was freaking out, but not really, because none of that stuff resonated with me. Nothing that they were checking for made me worried, because I didn't believe that I had a medical condition like what they were looking for, but they were just checking the boxes. And finally, I remember like it was yesterday, I went to the doctor and he said, John, he said, dude, there's nothing wrong with you. I can find nothing wrong with you. And I said, well, that's good news, but I'm still severely fatigued. And he said, well, are you feeling okay? I mean, in other words, are things going okay in your life for you? I mean, are you down? Do you feel depressed? I said, no, I really don't, other than over my lack of energy and my fatigue. He said, well, I got to tell you, there's just nothing left for me to do. I'm out of bullets, John. We've looked for everything, and I don't have anything else to offer you. I'm going to send you back home, resume your daily life. I'll say a prayer for you, and I hope you feel better. Check back in with me in 3 or 4 or 6 months if you're not feeling any better. So I dejectedly lowered my head and started walking for the exit. And just like Columbo, do you remember Columbo, the detective that after he would interrogate the suspect and they would start to walk away, he would say, oh, just one more thing. And the doctor, good friend of mine to this day, that was 40 years ago, I guess. He said, hey, John, have you ever been checked for allergies? I said, no. He said, well, let's check you for allergies. That's one last thing that we could try. So I went to the allergist, And sure enough, I came back and I was allergic to dust mites, ragweed, pet dander, imagine that, and had developed a mild case of asthma. Well, I got on allergy shots to treat me for those four things. We cleaned the bed linens. We cooked the sheets in hot water, and we dusted and we cleaned and we got rid of all the potential allergens that were in the house. And I started taking allergy shots. They didn't hurt. It was just a pain in the neck to have to go once every week and go get an allergy shot, and they wouldn't let you leave the doctor's office for 20 minutes after you took the shot in case you had an allergic reaction. I learned the routine well enough that I started taking the shot, and I'd just slip on out anyway. I figured if I was going to have an allergic reaction, I'd have it by the time I got to the car, and if I did, I'd just run back up. So the nurse busted me on that and said, "You can't do that anymore. We're not going to treat you if you do that again." I was always kind of a problem child that way. But anyway, I took the allergy shots. I cleaned up the house. We really didn't do anything about the dogs, and I don't regret that. We have 4 dogs today, and I love them to death. And if my nose itches and I sneeze because of it, so be it. But my mojo came back. I got my energy back. And what it was environment around me. And a big part of it was the smog that I was breathing every day in my commute to and from work. And I'm convinced that that was a big part of what was going on. I moved down to Florida. I live here most of the time, still have our house in Atlanta, still a resident of Georgia. I love Georgia. I go home about once every 2 months. Helen goes home once a month. But I still go home. My businesses are there. I pay taxes there. My doctors are there. My driver's license is there. I can't cut the cords with Georgia, where I've spent virtually my entire life, and I love our state. I worry about it, but that's a long, drawn-out explanation for saying that there is nothing wrong with being conservationist. And that's why I like the electric car. It has the potential to help us clean up our air. Do you remember when COVID came and nobody was driving? Did you walk outside your house and look up at the sky and see how beautiful the sky was? It was crystal clear. There was no smog. And we can get back there. Now, people that don't like the electric car are going to say, oh, it takes more energy or as much energy to produce a battery as it does to produce fossil fuel, and they are right. But that is changing, and it's going to change ever more rapidly. We will get to a point where we have more than enough batteries to supply every electric car on Earth, and then we will recycle those batteries. We will not have to mine for more natural resources. We will not have to use energy to produce energy. And we will cross a tipping point where it is much more ecological to have electric cars. Okay, I know some of you don't like that. We've talked about it. I'm sorry if I'm making you upset, but I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change my mind, so that's okay. But I'll keep advocating and keep educating. I have on the house that I'm building in Florida put all solar on the roof. And so the energy that will come to power my car will come from the sun by way of solar power. So, whew, boy, did I get down a rabbit hole there. I'm sorry. Let's go back to RFK. I'm just saying that there are degrees. Put it on the continuum. Do nothing on one end and be a climate fanatic on the other. Robert Kennedy skews towards the left part of that agenda, and he is a climate advocate to a fault. So that's where we diverge. He has been on the case of the vaccine and COVID. People called him crazy. They called him a denier, all this stuff. And folks, it has just proven to be so true. The scamdemic, as many people call it. And I have, but it wasn't a scamdemic. It wasn't. Let's be real. I have 8 friends, 8, more than casual acquaintances, people that I would have dinner with, drink a beer with, socialize with, 8 who died directly from COVID. Now, they may have had underlying health issues, but they had underlying health issues before they got COVID. Most of them died in the early days of COVID, but I can tell you 2 people that were close to me died, and I suspect, and many people suspect, that they all took, both of those individuals took all the vaccines and the booster. Well, let me tell you, after the second vaccine, I didn't want to take the first vaccine. And I pride myself as being someone who can't be manipulated and bamboozled. But I have to confess, I lowered my guard and I gave in to peer pressure, because I would have friends that came up to me and would say, "Oh, John, have you gotten the vaccine yet?" "Well, I'm on the board of the local hospital and I got the VIP vaccine. Don't you have the vaccine yet? What's the matter with you? You must not be important." So a friend of mine said, "Well, I've got a direct line into the health department. I'll get you on the list." And I was like, "Oh God, I'm so grateful. I'm so special. I'm on the list. I can get the vaccine." Except I don't trust it and I don't want it. But I lowered my guard. I let them manipulate me. I took the freaking vaccine, 2 of them. And then I said, I'm going to revert to what my instincts told me to begin with. There's something wrong with this picture. I'm not doing it anymore. Well, my 2 friends one who's younger than I am, one who was otherwise in good health. Like me, he had some bad knees, but he took the vaccine and the booster. Both of those people ended up having serious strokes that took them out. And my heart bleeds for them and their loved ones that they've left behind. But Bobby Kennedy was on this case before it was popular. And people criticized him and were very, very uncharitable towards him as a result of it. He's had a checkered past. Those of you who know the Bible better than I, let him without sin cast the first stone. There is a lot to be said for redemption. He cleaned up his life. He kicked his habits. I think he's led a very admirable life. And so I've said all along, and I've said it on this program long before it was popularized, that if there were some way that Trump and Kennedy could park their egos and come together, that I think we would have a real chance of cleansing our government. And as I've told you before, I'm not out for retaliation. I don't want retribution. I want accountability. And the people who killed John Fitzgerald Kennedy should be held accountable. Those who are living today and those who have died should all be held accountable. Well, how are you going to hold somebody accountable who's died? Well, I'll start very simply by taking Lyndon Baines Johnson's name off every street sign in every elementary school, and take J. Edgar Hoover's name off the FBI building, and take the Dulles name away from Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., because it was Allen Dulles who orchestrated, supervised the killing of Kennedy, I fervently believe. And I don't have the knowledge about Robert Kennedy like I do John Kennedy, but I don't believe Sirhan acted alone. Many people believe that he was acting as someone who had been brainwashed and had been programmed through either drugs or hypnosis or combinations of the two. Sirhan says that he has no memory whatsoever of having killed Robert Kennedy, and he disclaims culpability for lack of mental capacity if he in fact pulled that trigger. It resonates. It sounds credible. Martin Luther King, it was a horrible time in our history, and I want answers. And I have a fantasy. It won't ever happen. It won't ever happen. This is a wholesome fantasy. Don't start thinking bad things. You stop that. No, not that kind of fantasy. I have some of those too, but we'll save those for another day. All right. Boy, I'm on shaky ground here all of a sudden. But I do have this fantasy that Donald Trump becomes commander-in-chief, president of the United States, that he brings Robert Kennedy in as head of the CIA, and other patriots like Ken Paxton and Jeff Landry. Ken Paxton's the AG of Texas, who's They've gone after him like they went after Trump. They tried to impeach him from office, and he beat them in the Texas Senate, where his wife is a senator. But they held a week-long trial there, and they were unable to impeach him. I know Ken Paxton. I had a reception for him at my house here in Florida. It was a really nice occasion and raised a bunch of money. And I really like Ken Paxton. I've met Jeff Landry. He was the Attorney General of Louisiana, who is now that state's governor, and he has courage. But I want Donald Trump to recruit all of these people into his administration, and I want them to have one charge and one charge only, and that is trust the American people, believe in us, and give us the truth. All the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I want to know about Benghazi. I want to know about Crooks. I want to know, why did he have 3 foreign bank accounts? I'm 71 years old. The thought of a foreign bank account has never occurred to me. Has the thought of a foreign bank account ever occurred to you? Have you ever thought about opening a bank account in a foreign country? So riddle me this. Why would a 20-year-old have 3 foreign accounts? Mike Waltz, who is the congressman from the county just north of Palm Beach County where I'm sitting, said this week that he does not believe that Michael Crooks acted alone and that he suspects it was an inside job. These are the people who accuse Donald Trump as being a threat to democracy. My fantasy is, my hope is, my prayer is that he becomes a threat to bureaucracy, because that's the problem with this country. They are using our money, our tax money, like it was monopoly money. They spread it around like it's water. There's no accountability. They're $800 million missing. Or $1 billion, missing from the Department of Defense. There has never been an audit of the Department of Defense. Nobody knows what the budget is of the CIA except a select handful of people. And then you have Christopher Wray, who is obviously, to me, it is so apparent to me, is actively participating in a cover-up of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania on July the 13th, 2024. And it has got to stop. It is not the country I grew up in. It is not the country that I want to live in. The country of communism, of selection rather than election, the country of lies rather than the truth, the country with no accountability, and the deeds just continue. And the reckless spending still continues. $35 trillion, and it is going up $1 trillion every 120 days. Every 4 months, the deficit increases $1 trillion. We are on a path of absolute destruction. And so you have to ask yourself, why? Why? Who would want to ruin the greatest country on earth? Oh, China, you reckon? Maybe they've got something to do with this. Tim Waltz, not Mike Waltz. I like Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz, congressman from Florida who I just referenced, and he's a Green Beret, by the way. He's earned his stripes. He's earned my respect. Tim Waltz, on the other hand, stole valor. What does that mean? He lied. He told us he went into combat. He didn't go into combat. He resigned from the military when they told him he had to go into combat. I don't really have a problem with that, as I've said. Okay, you're 45. I don't blame you. I'm 71. I ain't going into combat. I've aged out. So did he. No shame in that. The shame is lying about it, lying to the American people and stealing the valor of saying that he went into combat when he didn't. They just continue to lie with impunity, and the American people don't hold them accountable because it is a game between the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots are saying, go on, keep lying because you're giving me what I want. You're giving me free stuff. You're giving me free Obama phones. You're giving me welfare. You're giving me unemployment. You're giving me student loan forgiveness. Kamala Harris's entire program, her only platform is give, 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 give. You add it up, it's another $1.5 trillion that she wants to increase the federal bloated budget that we already have. And that's who 48% of America want. And they want it because we've worked for it, we've got it, and now they want to take it from us. And it is as wrong can be. I don't begrudge anybody living the American dream. I respect hard work and people who pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I started to work at the age of 12, and I have never stopped. Not since 12 years old. When I was in high school, I had a job every afternoon after school. My dad didn't tell me I had to have a job. I mean, one reason I wasn't any good at sports. And the other reason I got bullied and picked on in high school. So it was a pretty nice place for me to find refuge and go find a job that I could get paid to work in. But the fact is, I like to make money. I don't make apologies for that. I was never given anything, except I will tell you that I was given an education by my parents. God rest their soul. God love them. I miss them. I love them. I love them more than anything on earth, other than I love them as much as now my own family. I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. I'm so lucky. God's given me that. God's given me that. But the material things I have, I've worked for. And I've worked damned hard. And I'm still working. I value that. I love to work. And it's a mental thing. You either love to work or you hate to work. But the day you decide you love to work is the day that you're going places. Because you can live the American dream. And I've had opportunities given to me. I have. And I'm grateful to them. I'm grateful for them. I happened to have married a girl that came from an affluent family. And I went to work for her father. But I can't tell you that it was the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. I can't tell you that my little ego liked it, going to work for daddy-in-law. But I worked my butt off. And I achieved. And I make no apology for that. And I'm still working. So I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying that we've got choices in this life. And our choices are that we can work and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and go to church and try and... I like a traditional family. I do. I don't condemn someone who chooses a different lifestyle. It's not what I would choose for myself, but I don't judge or condemn those who do. But I don't push my lifestyle on somebody. And I don't like being pushed to accept a different lifestyle. Live your life. Enjoy your life. Make your maker. I'm going to have to meet my maker. I'm fine with that. So my fantasy is that we get people who feel the way that you and I do, that this government is out of control, that they have gotten away with lying and cheating and stealing Biden $30 to $60 million. Why hasn't that been the topic of conversation? Why has that not been why he was excluded and removed from the ticket? I think that's purely good justification to me. But I think there's an undercurrent that is a large part of why he was being removed. But it's time to clean out the barn, drain the swamp. Robert Kennedy endorsed Trump. Now you've got Jeff Landry and Ken Paxton and a host of other people who have shown courage and a willingness to confront and battle evil, bring them to Washington, put them in positions. And my fantasy is that he'll engage the military and he'll show up at the gates of the CIA and he'll say, open the gates, we're coming in. And the day before, he should suspend everybody that he suspects has been doing these deeds until suspend them with pay, but you can't come to work. Go inside the CIA, get the files, get the computer records. Let's get it. Let's find out. Go to the FBI, same thing. Get the military. Go bash down the front door. Go get the files, get the computer records. So round up the witnesses and let's find out what has been going on in this country. Who are they blackmailing? Who are they paying off? Who are they bribing? They know. Their record's there. Let's get it. Let's get it all. Let's tell it all, brother. And then let's hold them accountable. Get this nation back to a place of integrity and morality and true virtue. And let's stop talking about it. Let's start doing it. That's my fantasy. That's my prayer. And that's why I'm happy that Robert Kennedy is joining forces with Trump. I think there's some real opportunity there. Somebody else who's rejoined the Trump organization is my friend Corey Lewandowski. Corey has joined the campaign, and I'm not sure exactly what his role is, but he's back. And Chris LaCivita, who has billed the Trump campaign $1.7 million in 2 years, I don't really fault that. Look, Trump's a businessman. He's a big boy. He can take care of himself. I don't think that Chris LaCivita has done anything that justifies us being suspect of him. Look, I mean, I'm just telling you, you and I are in it for different reasons. I'm not saying that Trump's handlers and the people in his inner circle aren't patriots or aren't in it for the right reasons, but they are also in it for money. It's their profession. And you know that when you hire them. Corey Lewandowski ran my campaign for Attorney General in Georgia. I have the utmost respect for Corey Lewandowski. He does not work for free, nor would I expect him to. He has experience, knowledge, know-how, and an incredible brain. I was more than happy and willing to pay him for it. What I don't respect about Chris LaCivita, and I'm sorry to say, Susie Wiles, who I think will smile at your face and stab you in the back. I have some firsthand experience in that regard. I don't know that for a fact. It's not really fair for me to say that, but that's my gut. That's my impression. There's a lot that we could talk about there. But here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. Trump made a horrible miscalculation when he debated Joe Biden. Now, we're being Monday morning quarterbacks. Let me own that too. You know, I have to be honest. I thought in the moment, I was like, yeah, go get him. Put your foot on his throat and keep it there all the way till November. I wasn't getting paid to make those decisions. I didn't sit and spend every waking hour of my day analyzing the wisdom of debating Joe Biden 3 months before the 2 months before the Democratic National Convention. I did not consciously sit and try and predict what the ramifications of that would be. If I was there and that was my full-time job, I should have, just as Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles should have, and they should have advised the president not to even think about it. Because what we ended up with was exposing the world to just how far gone Joe Biden was, and it precipitated Biden's withdrawing from the race. What a glorious position we would have been in had he waited until September the 10th, which I think is the first debate with ABC, and then exposed the nominee of the party, the official nominee of the Democratic Party, to be the person that Joe Biden is, of diminished capacity and declining mental capacity and senility. So people make age the issue. I think that's wrong. He's 2 years older than Trump. Don't make age the issue. I know people in their 90s that are sharp as a tack. Their age should not be the determinant. Mental capacity should be the determinant. And on that score, Biden loses, Trump wins. So now we've got to beat Kamala. As Trump says, it's like being in a prize fight. You got your opponent against the ropes. You've just cold cocked him in the face. The referee's called a timeout. And instead of resuming the boxing match, you just substitute opponents. Just substitute Cassius Clay for Sonny Liston, okay? Resume the match. That's just so wrong. The Democrats should have figured out a mechanism to have had a process, a democratic process, while accusing Trump of being a threat to democracy. Well, he's a threat, all right, but it's not to democracy. It's a threat to the bureaucracy. and I can't wait. I just hope we can get it across the line, and I hope that we can stop them from cheating. But cheating, they will, and cheating, they do, as we will hear from our next guest. We're coming to you on the John Fredericks Radio Network up and down the East Coast. Thank you, John Fredericks, for allowing me this opportunity to have this microphone and come here every Saturday and share my views. I hope you find them informative. I view myself as an educator. I clearly have my partisan positions, my biases, but I think they're informed biases, not biases for bias sake. We also come to you on the CDM Media and their 13 platforms across the World Wide Web. You can also join us live right now on Getter.com, YouTubeLive.com, and Rumble.com. So just search for John Gordon Truth. On Getter, we're on the John Fredericks live channel. And as always, I just ask you, I work so hard to do this broadcast every week. You owe me nothing. It's not poor, pitiful me. Believe me, I enjoy it. I don't make a penny off of it. In fact, it costs me money. Q over here, he's my producer. He ain't working for free. I wish he would, but he hadn't volunteered yet. And I've got an assistant who helps book guests, and I've got another associate producer who handles our social media. All I ask in return is that you consider, only if you want to, you're not obligated, but if you would go to one of those platforms or all of them, it'll take you about 5 seconds. Subscribe and hit the like button. The algorithm bases our placement based on how many subscribers and how many likes we get. So if you like the message, if you'd like to help me get the message out to more people, if you'd take less than a couple of minutes and go to Rumble, Getter, YouTube, search for John Gordon Truth, subscribe and like, I'd be so grateful to you. And it would allow us to broaden my reach. So yes, we do expect the Democrats to cheat. And our next guest is the victim of cheating in Pinellas County, Florida, where it's not supposed to happen. Chris Gleason, welcome to The Truth.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. You ran for the elections official of Pinellas County, and where are you in the race? Did you get through the primary, or do you have an opponent?
So the primary was the general. There was no Democrat opponent to the incumbent Republican. And so the primary was this Tuesday, and that was the official race for the year. That was it. However, there were some significant issues here in Pinellas County with the primary, and some of the same issues that we saw across Florida, in particular with election night reporting going down, and a lot of shenanigans with vote by mail ballots.
So did you won the primary?
No,
you did not win the primary, and you're alleging that that's because there were 217,000 or 219,000 suspect ballots.
Well, it's worse than suspect. It's illegally requested. So Florida law is very, very specific, especially after 2020 and 2022. So the legislature enacted much stronger laws in order to handle ballot harvesting. And they had made some changes to the law to make it a felony if you request a vote by mail ballot for somebody who isn't a family member. And so what we identified here in Pinellas County was that on June 23rd, somebody unlawfully requested over 219,000 vote by mail ballots for voters without their knowledge and without their consent on that day, because it was a Sunday.
A Sunday. And that's what struck me as highly unusual.
Yes. So with this new law, there were only 3 ways that you can order a vote by mail ballot. One would be over the telephone. which we know couldn't have happened on June 23rd because it was a Sunday. The other way would be in person in writing. And there would be a very, very specific form called the DSDE 160 form. And so because it was on Sunday, we know that there's no way that 219,000 people did not all come in on that day. So that leaves one other possible legal way to do it. And that would have been through the Supervisor of Elections website. And unfortunately, the company that's the vendor for hosting this is the same vendor who was responsible for all of the election night reporting systems going down on election night for the third election in a row that this happened. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. And so as a candidate, myself, and a lot of my supporters, we were very concerned about this. So we went to the Supervisor of Elections office and we asked for the records, the public records, according to 101.62 that they are required to give to us. And they refused to give them to us. And what they've been doing is trying to delay giving those records to us, because giving those records to us would expose the fact that these voters, 219,000 of them, never actually requested a vote by mail ballot on that day. So I guess the real legal question here is, how do you legally certify an election? How do you legally administer election with vote by mail ballots where 90% of those vote by mail ballots were all unlawfully requested in the name of people who weren't relatives of them, right?
Well, statistically, logically, it boggles the imagination that 219,000 people would have gone. There's only one way they could have requested those ballots on that day, and that would have been through the website, because the offices were closed. There was nobody manning the phones. I guess people could have left messages on the answering machine, theoretically, but it's highly unlikely. And so I'm sure, make sure I've got this right. The lady, Ms. Marcus, who was the supervisor of the Board of Elections, that's who you were opposing in your primary.
That is correct.
And so what was the margin of victory that she is claiming?
I think it was about 120,000 vote by mail ballots.
And so Judge Ramsberger, who the case was assigned to, heard your evidence and granted, I guess, the equivalent of summary judgment to Elections Supervisor Marcus?
Not exactly. So what happened was, when we first discovered all of this, some very concerned citizens, they dropped off 241 requests for grand jury investigation to the Chief Justice in the Superior Court, and that would be Judge Crane. And so on Tuesday, on Election Day, I was out at the polls, and I just saw all of these people coming to the polling stations with vote by mail ballots in their hand. I mean, it was like everybody I saw had them, and it was a problem. And so I was told, I went into the polling precinct and I started talking to the clerks, and then they told me I could go down the street to the St. Pete office for the Supervisor of Elections. So I went down there. And it was just a steady stream of people coming in with vote by mail ballots, and they were dropping them in the drop box.
Individual ballots
or individual ballots
or groups of ballots?
Yeah, individual ballots. And there were some people who came in with two at a time, casting two ballots at a time. And so I'm seeing all of this, I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I went right down the street to the Superior Court, and I filed a motion for an emergency hearing to get an injunction to stop the counting of these vote by mail ballots. And so what happened was the judge the clerk at that location assigned the case to a judge, and they said, okay, it's been filed. So then I went to the criminal court on the other side of the county, and I went to go speak to the Chief Justice, the same Chief Justice that the concerned citizens had gone to the day before. And that was Judge Crane. And so I wrote a letter to Judge Crane requesting a special emergency investigation into Julie Marcus for election fraud. And I wasn't allowed to speak to the judge, but I was told that my letter would get to him. And then yesterday, the day after that, I reached out to the judicial assistant for the judge that had the case assigned to him, and she never got back to me. Then yesterday, I ended up getting a notification from Judge Crane that he was dismissing my motion or declining my motion for emergency hearing, and that he was reassigning my case to Judge Ramsberger. And so that's how that all went down. But, it's not like the chief judge who ruled against me, Judge Crane, it's not like he didn't know that there was misfeasance, malfeasance, and election fraud before he made that decision with the initial complaint and motion for emergency hearing that I had requested.
Now, why do you say he didn't know that? Are you
No,
saying
I'm saying there's no way he didn't.
he did not realize.
Yeah. I mean, I went there. He went there. I mean, there was a bunch of us that went there. And so that really calls into question the integrity of the chief judge for the Pinellas County Court, I mean, that's a deeply problematic issue. Deeply problematic.
Well, we're seeing it all over the country in different forms, one form or another, of just mammoth voting irregularities and people that are on the voting rolls that have either died, moved away, or otherwise ineligible. And I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, it feels to me that there are elements in our society that are trying to steal our republic. And they seem to be doing a pretty good job of it. But if the allegations that you're making are true, why would Judge Crane dismiss your action? Why? But the thing I don't understand is he dismissed your motion or your petition to halt the counting, is what I'm understanding you to say.
Yes.
But then he assigned the case then to Judge Marcus to decide whether to appoint a grand jury. Is that?
No. So what happened was he dismissed my motion or declined my motion to stop the counting. He declined that. And so today they certified the count. Okay. And so next Thursday, Judge Ramsberger is supposed to hear my case. And I'm not feeling warm and fuzzy right now because of what I've been seeing here in Pinellas County, in particular with Judge Crane, Judge Ramsberger, Judge Muscarella, and, there are judges on the canvassing board. I mean, there's no way that they don't know what they're doing is unlawful and wrong. I mean, there's no way.
But your opponent was a Republican as well, right? You primaried her.
Yes, but she's really, I would probably call her more a Democrat than a Republican.
Yeah, I think we call them rhinos.
Yes.
That too seems to be an infection that we see across the country, including in the United States Congress. So what do you make of this? Do you think that there is corruption? Excuse me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so if you think about it, right, the problem that we have is that these judges, they're elected, or rather selected, rather than elected. We haven't had, from what I can see in the data with relating to the voting systems that they've been using to administer elections, here in Pinellas County, we have not had a lawful, certifiable election since 2009. And that creates some significant issues.
That's just incredulous. How do you
It
draw
is.
that conclusion?
I mean, here's, and here was the thing. We had some very brave whistleblowers who were poll clerks who came forward and took pictures of the tabulator tapes that showed that the modems used to administer the 2020 and 2022 elections, and more recently, this election, this year, had modems attached to them. And according to the United States Election Assistance Commission, if you have a modem attached to the tabulator, the EAC certification for the voting system is void in its entirety.
Well, and then they tell you that, well, there's no modem. What you're seeing is not really there. It's beyond maddening, and it just keeps going on and on. So the motion to stop the counting, the petition to stop the counting, was denied by Judge Crane. He then punted over to Judge Ramsberger your petition for the appointment of a grand jury to investigate elections fraud. Have you been to the sheriff, just out of curiosity? Have you been to law enforcement at all and asked them to investigate this? Because if what you're saying is true, it is a crime, and law enforcement should investigate it if they care about the law.
Here's the problem for Pinellas County. In 2020, the Sheriff Galtieri, he took possession, him and his deputies took possession of the ballots for their own election and transported them. And they refused to, or they deny that they have any responsive records when we did a public records request for dash cam footage for the sheriffs transporting the ballots, for the body cams for the officers transporting the ballots. We asked for the chain of custody logs for the ballots in that election. And they said that they had no responsive records.
Does the law assign him the duty of being the custodian of the voting records?
No, it doesn't.
Then why does he have the voting records?
That's a good question. So we asked him, what legal authority did he have in that public records request? And in that records request, he said, we have no responsive records.
But that becomes a circuitous argument or conversation. He didn't answer your question, but just simply said that they don't have the records. But he had the records. So what did you do with them, Sheriff?
He doesn't want to tell us. And so when we first started this process, I went to the sheriff. And then when I got no response, he said, hey, look at DeSantis, he just set up an election crimes office. And so you need to go talk to them. And so we went and we talked to the Secretary of State. We talked to the General Counsel. We tried to get this before Ashley Moody. I mean, we went to the Office of Election Crimes and Security. I've gone to the EAC. I've gone to the FBI. I've gone to the U.S. Attorney.
Did you go to the governor?
Oh, yes. He was copied on all of my election complaints, all of the things, all of the issues that we were finding. But you know what he did do? Because we had seen in 2020 this massive problem with ballots being illegally adjudicated as being 100% blank. Well, apparently he and the Secretary of State, Cord Byrd, must have done something, because in counties like Miami-Dade and Hillsborough and Orange, this ever number of increasing blank ballots that had a nice long linear progression going up suddenly went to statistical zero. And then Governor DeSantis was able to secure the governor race in November. Isn't that funny how that works?
By a huge margin, I would hasten to add. But how do you adjudicate a blank ballot, for God's sakes? That is fraud on its face. I mean, a 2-year-old can tell you that you can't count a blank ballot for anybody. But are you saying that they did?
So what we're saying, and this is what we know, is that people had gone out and cast a 100% ballot. But they filled it in. So these people, they go and they fill in their ballot and they stick them in the machine. And then the machine reads it as being 100% blank and doesn't tell the voter that it's 100% blank.
Well, then, so then it seems like that would be appropriate, that whoever's counting the ballots would go back to the original source ballot and count it based on what you can see with your eyes.
Well, that would be a good thing. However, what we're seeing and what we've been told is that the tabulators where you're scanning in those ballots, we're being told that there's no ballot images being captured there. So what happens is there's no capture of what really was counted there, right, at the precinct. And then the sheriff takes possession of those ballots, but there's no ballot image from the tabulator. And then when the sheriff goes and drops off those ballots, what happens?
So now I'm hearing that he's dropping the ballots off. Where does he drop the ballots off?
At the Supervisor of Elections office later on.
Are they the custodian of the records?
What's that? Law? That's supposed to, yeah, that's the Supervisor of Elections, where they're supposed to count all the ballots and audit all of the ballots and control all the ballots. So
in Georgia, where my home state, the custodian of the records is the clerk of the Superior Court, which seems to be, it should be a good check and balance. But when you make an open records request, well, first of all, it was unclear whether a ballot was a public record until the legislature passed a law in the last session declaring that it was. To my knowledge, there have not been, I'm sure there have been open records requests. I don't know what have happened to them, whether they've been fulfilled or not since that law was passed. But
well, we know clearly, in Georgia, right, that you guys use Dominion machines. And Georgia is actually the first state that I got my hands on the audit logs. So in Georgia, rather than calling them a blank ballot, they're called unreadable ballots. And so those ballot images are deleted. And I saw them in the logs being deleted, delete. And we saw that. And there was a lot of errors. There was hash mismatch errors. There was all kinds of things. And so in the audit logs that I saw in Georgia, in particular, Gwinnett County at the central count tabulators, there were so many errors that even if the machines didn't have modems, even if they had so many errors that the machines, there's no way that they would have met the legal requirements for accuracy to be certified in Georgia.
What a mess. So what's next for your case? Are you going to appeal Judge Crane's decision?
I actually filed a motion for reconsideration yesterday, an emergency motion for reconsideration. He didn't hear the rule on it. I'm going to be filing a separate action, which is going to be the challenge of election now. And I'm evaluating whether or not I'm going to also file a federal suit for deprivation of rights under the color of law and a myriad of other things that
we used the 14th Amendment in the case that I was involved in Georgia, saying that the voter had not received equal treatment under the law because their ballot was not counted and other people's ballots were counted. So therefore, it was a 14th Amendment challenge. So I guess Judge Crane's decision is now basically in concrete because they've counted the votes theoretically and certified the election. So you can't appeal, you can't ring that bell in effect. So an appeal wouldn't do any good. The Supreme Court or Court of Appeals would moot at their doorstep.
I have 10 days to challenge. I have 10 days to challenge. So I have 10 days to challenge the election. So I'm going to contest it, and we'll see. We'll see where this goes from there.
Well, I'm
But
very glad that you're not rolling over and playing dead and that you're doing what you can to hold them accountable. I doubt that being supervisor of elections has been your childhood dream and that you're doing it out of your sense of public service and duty. And we just need more people like you, Chris, because we're going to lose this country if people don't wake up and get involved. And for too long, myself included, we've taken our freedoms for granted. And Ronald Reagan told us we should have paid closer attention that freedom is not free and that we've got to all fight for it. So I wish you well, and please keep us posted. Now, before you leave us, I did notice that you were, like the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, you served in the National Guard for 10 years from your home state.
Yeah.
So tell us about the National Guard, if you will. Should we ascribe the same level of respect? And I don't really know how to phrase this accurately. Of course we do. But do you equate service in the National Guard with someone who's serving in the armed services?
Yeah, absolutely.
The training is the same, the pay is the same, but just the duty is not. You're not on active duty until you get called up. Is that basically the difference?
No, you do serve on active duty. You serve on active duty for your initial training. You serve on active duty for your basic training, your AIT, and any other schools that you go to. You're on active duty during that time, and then during if you're called up, you go overseas. You're on active duty.
Well, and that's the complaint against Mr. Waltz, that he was called up, and instead of going to Iraq, he just punted and said, okay, I'm out. I'll take retirement. And then claimed disingenuously that he had served in combat.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular insight or view of this conversation that the nation is having now?
I mean, if you're claiming that you've served in combat, that would be not good, right? That would be not good. That would be
that would be. I'm sorry.
I mean, but he's a politician, and they all lie. I mean, really, So I mean, we have selections in America, not elections, and there's a lot of really bad stuff going on, and we have to hold all of these people accountable at the end of the day, right?
Well, that seems like what you're trying to do. That is what we tried to do in Atlanta against the Fulton Board of Elections in a very well publicized case there. We had actual hard evidence that was presented to the judge. He ruled that we had demonstrated a prima facie case. And then Fonnie Willis comes along and says, oh, no, there was nothing wrong with the 2020 election. You're trying to steal an election when actually the Democrats are the ones who really did steal an election. It is projectionism at its finest. And I don't know how we stop it, because it at the risk of being labeled a conspiratorialist, which I have not worried about that label for a long time now, Chris, that is a risk that I'm willing to take. But I don't know how you do orchestrate something on this kind of a scale unless it's just a wink, wink and a nod. And, we just hate the Republicans so bad that it justifies our actions.
What we found nationwide with the smurfing, in particular tied to your girl, Fannie Willis, I mean, they're all in on it. I mean, it's a dirty, nasty election fraud RICO operation. And at the end of the day, we, the people, are being harmed by it. And we have had clearly an infiltration of legitimate organizations by a highly organized criminal element. And that's the very basis of the RICO statute, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. But then the judges, first of all, the prosecutors won't prosecute and the judges throw them out if they do. And so it just seems like kind of a hopeless situation to me, unless and until we can get a honest broker. At least, we hope that Donald Trump could be our savior, that we get him into the White House, that this go round he is wiser and he will appoint people that are faithful to the truth and the rule of law and the Constitution, and that they will have the guts to stand up and do their duty to defend the law. But I want to see heads roll. I want to see, I'm not out for revenge, but I'm out for accountability, as you say, Chris. And it's high time that we get some. And if we don't, I just don't see a way out of this quagmire. I watch every day of current events and what's happening. We've got a powder keg in the making in Ukraine and Russia. They're using American-made munitions to fire on the heartland of Russia into Moscow, in fact, their nation's capital. And if you think Putin is going to stand by and let that happen, and he is warning that if you keep this up, there's going to be hell to pay. Ergo, I wonder if this is not an intentional effort on behalf of our liberal, democratic, corrupt leadership to get us into a war so they can suspend the national elections, because they have literally tried everything else to stop Donald Trump and our true Republicans from being able to serve in office. They don't have anything else left. And they've proven that they will stoop to no known lows to get their way at the expense of our country.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we're fighting, right? That's why.
Well, you keep fighting, Chris, and thank you for coming on The Truth today. We will follow your good work and say a prayer for you and for the judges, to give them the courage to stand up and make the right decisions based on the facts and the law. That's really all we ask. I don't think it's asking too much.
No, it's not.
Well, you have a great rest of your weekend, and thank you so much. Chris Gleason, he is fighting the fight from Pinellas County, Florida. That is Clearwater, basically, is the county seat of Pinellas. And we just need a lot more people like Chris.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate it.
Well, that's The Truth for today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Remember, if you like us, please go and like, subscribe, and share our program with your friends, family, and people that you can influence. And we will be back next Saturday with another edition of The Truth. Have a great weekend, everybody.